is it's close to 3 minutes, it's just shy of 3 minutes, and it's an instrumental, just like the first track, Talkatavi, or whatever the hell it is. So this track basically, it's an instrumental. Is there any vocals like there is in the first track? No, there's no vocals. Are the band actually kind of in this track? Not really, it's just you know, kind of strings. You got a bit of the kind of choir singing thing in there. The song kind of starts a certain way, and that kind of stays the same for the whole near enough 3 minutes. There are change-ups, like the choir kind of comes in eventually. They don't start off the bat, and then some new kind of things and new kind of plays happen, but it's basically, even though they change things up a little, it's nothing too big. It's mostly just consistently the same kind of melody and rhythm. So it's something that's just an instrumental which has very little to it, and then does very little to kind of stay engaging and be interesting. What is it doing to be relevant? I don't necessarily know. It doesn't play into the next track, so it's basically just by itself just instrumental nothingness. Does it sound big and epic? It's got the dun 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 dun, which, you know, is the Nightwish kind of thing. So if you kind of like that, and then the kind of orchestra going ha 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 ha, if you just like them noises, then the track does it. But other than that, there's nothing to it. So, you know, if you're into the dun 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 and the ha 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 kind of vocal things, then here you go. But otherwise, I just skip this track. It's just kind of a waste of time. So that's all there is to talk about this track. So that's good and fast. So let's go swiftly on to the next track then, which is Turn Loose the Mermaids. So Turn Loose the Mermaids is overall quite a simple track. It's a melody. It's simple. There's not much to it. Now, usually people kind of get from me that I keep saying you need to have a lot of elements and there needs to be a lot to it, but although I do say that and I still believe that, it's not always true. That isn't always the way you have to approach something. If you're going to approach something simple, you kind of have to nail it. It's a very hard thing to nail, something that is very simple and there's not much to it. Because if you've got something really simple, very straightforward, and then make that last for 4 minutes 19, you're going to have to keep your audience engaged, and if it's something excruciatingly simple, that's very tricky to do. So the way to approach it is to basically have what you are showing to be unbelievably catchy or beautiful, very pretty, very soothing. You basically have to have an emotional connection to follow with it, and you have to really strongly feel for something that is simple like this. So with that being said, Turn Loose the Mermaids, it's like acoustic. You've obviously got Annette, she's singing in a really kind of nice voice, again the high end style, that's where her voice kind of sits, the high pitched style, but it's very nice, her voice, her delivery and everything. The acoustic rhythm is kind of quite nice. It's not very basic kind of chords. It's got a real kind of interesting rhythm to it and everything. It might be finger picked actually as well, because there's a quite you know, intricate play with the kind of picking and fretting that's going on with the acoustic. I could have probably phrased that better, but that's what you got. You got a bit of that kind of Nightwish flute near the beginning, which I seriously do think is a staple for Nightwish. I think it's one of the better qualities, that flute. It's very unique and everything, and it sounds really nice. So that's here, I kind of like it. It doesn't, you know, stay too long, which is a bit of a shame. I would have liked a little more from it, but yeah, you get a bit of that. Then for the most part, it is basically just the same kind of acoustic Annette kind of thing, and it does get quite repetitive, like, even though it is nice, the acoustic and her voice, and you got that kind of flute and everything, and then you got some other kind of sounds mixed in at points, so it's very nice, but because it doesn't do anything too drastically different, for 4 minutes it wanes ever so slightly. Nearer the end, they kind of build it up a bit, and you get a bit of drum and everything. The end of the song, it goes into that kind of Irish kind of thing, where everything goes a bit kind of more you know, upbeat and everything, and it has that kind of Irish kind of rhythm to it, if you know what that kind of sounds like. So it gets a little kind of upbeat near the end and a bit more cheerful. And it doesn't sing over that part before that, just before she finishes singing, she kind of does her kind of own backing, so she'll sing and then she'll be in the background as herself. So she just gives a bit more of a kind of heightened element to her kind of vocal delivery near the end of the song. But overall, it's a nice sounding song, but it is very straightforward. Some people will probably find this quite boring unless you kind of have an ear and appreciation for, you know, like the more kind of subtle beauty of music. So some people aren't going to like it, other people will, if you kind of just have the ear for it. But even with the ear for it, I still think you're going to find it maybe drags on a little, it probably overstays its welcome. You know, people may also disagree with that, but I do think that is an accurate assumption. So let's get on to the next track, Rest Calm. So this track is another one that is actually masterly crafted, unlike some of the others, so everything kind of comes together for this track. And I'll explain why, of course, just to back up my you know, opinion. So what's good about this is it's about 7 minutes. It's a fairly long track, so you need to kind of keep everything engaging. You need to make sure each different section is engaging and everything has to kind of flow together instead of feeling like it's disjointed. And this track kind of nails all of that. There is a lot of moving elements, a lot of new things. There's a solo here. There's a lot of similar things but done differently, so you get a new flavour on it. There's a lot of highs, there's a lot of lows, there's some great vocals, plays with vocals, and everything actually fits and flows perfectly together from going from one section to another. So basically perfectly done, unlike other tracks which things could feel a little disjointed, or some parts were excruciatingly empty until they then decided to build up on it. So the song starts kind of slow but kind of musical. It's got a bit of a, you know, that kind of fantasy kind of sound to it, a bit mystical, kind of musical, slightly dark and depressing. And then you get a heavy guitar riff with the kind of single cymbal tap on the drum. And then it kind of builds up from there. You start getting a bit of orchestration in, and then you know, it gets to a fairly heavy kind of standard, which leads you into the first verse. The first verse is actually sung by the bass player. It's his, you know, better vocal style, which definitely suits his kind of voice. So extremely powerful and bright and very sharp delivery and everything. So incredible energy and power that he uses, and it sounds great with, you know, the kind of heavy kind of guitars and everything. It's not just pure heavy guitars. Obviously, you can have the keys and everything just to kind of give a bit of a more kind of bright element to it, and break it up a little. And then he leads it into Annette that comes in, and then she sings in a more kind of open, breathy kind of singing style. So she's more open, more rounded vocal delivery than what he was. So she does that, and then after that it then goes into acoustic and melody with Annette singing in a more soothing style. And that actually flows perfectly from her kind of higher end round vocal delivery into the acoustic softer vocal delivery. It actually flows perfectly well. And because we've had the kind of aggression from the bass player, and then we had the kind of more kind of anthemic, louder, wider range delivery with Annette, and now we're going down into the soft stuff with the acoustic, and then the really beautiful, nice singing style. So we've had a fair few kind of ranges, and all of them are flow together perfectly well, and they're well fitted. So going back into the first verse again, it's again the bass player, but then the second half of his part, Annette actually duets with him, so they both sing at the same time. It just adds a new element to it, and it just makes it bigger and just more interesting. Just like, wow, I really like the first part, but now Annette's singing with him. That is interesting. It's something new. I don't know if I prefer it or not, but I wouldn't. If I prefer it with him, I wouldn't take Annette away, just because it's still really good, and I like the kind of contrast between the two. It's fascinating. And then Annette kind of takes it again into her area that was previously done, and back into the melody. You get children singing at parts, so that really soft acoustic part, it goes with just kind of like, I think it's just piano, you don't get acoustic, and then it's that child choir and everything, so it's all very kind of innocent, yet it has that kind of creepiness to it, which the children choir kind of has in this album, and I really like that. The guitar solo starts with like a really long kind of holds to begin with, and then there's a fairly long pause and everything. Then he kind of comes back, and it's a bit more of that kind of fast, bluesy kind of speed solo. So not overly shreddy, but it's definitely a bluesy kind of style. It's got a fair quick pace to it, and it has a few holds, and that is basically how the solo goes. And then Annette comes back again, just with being just not just projecting her voices with ow and things like that. Then it goes into that melodic part, but it's not acoustic now. It's full guitar kind of keys and everything, whole band. And instead of Annette singing it, it's actually the bass player singing it now. So you got the bass player in a more kind of heavier version now doing this. So you've got a new kind of backing band version of it, as well as a new singer delivering this part. So again, fairly interesting. And then I think Annette kind of does a duet with him near the end. I forgot. I think she does. And I think the kids come in a little bit as well. So yeah, so many elements to this song, constant kind of shifts and change, because everything flows and there's energy and then there's beauty parts. It's just like, it has so many things to it, and it keeps you engaged by constantly flowing and changing and giving you something new, but not being completely, drastically changing to the part where it's just like, God, I can't keep up. It's like natural progressions, just a slight progression, just add a new element here, a new element there. So perfectly executed with great highs and lows, and changing things around, and musically it's all backed up and everything, and you got a solo. So perfectly done with this track. So let's see what the next track kind of has to offer, if it can follow the tangent with this track, Rest Calm. So the next track is going to be The Crow, the Owl and the Dove. So this track is yet again a melodic track, just like Turn Loose the Mermaids was, but this track does it a lot better than that one, because Turn Loose the Mermaids, it was quite repetitive. There wasn't really that much new stuff really going on. As for The Crow, the Owl and the Dove, there is actually a fair few elements to it, and then they keep adding elements as the song progresses, so it kind of keeps things kind of new, interesting, and it just keeps the audience's ear a lot better than Turn Loose the Mermaids did. So it just starts off acoustic, so it starts off very simple and then kind of grows from there. So it's just acoustic, you get the male vocalist, the bass player, he's singing in the melodic way. I usually don't like his voice in this kind of style, but here it sounds really, really good. He really pulls it off in this song. And he starts, and then he kind of changes it over to Annette, and then kind of goes back to him, and then there's a bit of a duet. Then, back to him, back to Annette, duet and everything. So they keep kind of going between the two, then all coming together at certain parts. So really nice. Obviously you got the contrast of male to female. His singing style, he definitely has a bit more of kind of like a pain to his kind of voice. As for hers, she has more of, that kind of like bright innocence to her. So even the way he kind of delivers it with emotion, his emotion kind of seems different to that of Annette. So there's also that as well, but it's all just acoustic. But it still sounds fingerpicked, so it still is a kind of interesting kind of rhythm that the acoustic has. Following that, it goes just pure Annette style, with the only thing backing her is actually just a female choir. No, it's not an intense female choir, it's a very, 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 very subtle female choir. Very, very faint, very in the background, very kind of breathy. It's not like, it's really, really faint, high choir singing. And then obviously Annette sings over the top of it, so it definitely has a very unique kind of element to it. The acoustic comes in about halfway through that, I think, and then it leads back into the start between the bass and Annette again, and they go through that again. but now they've added the new element of adding a kind of drum to it, so it just adds a bit more of a beat to it. You know, just add a bit more element, make it a bit more interesting, with a better beat to it. Then back to Annette's, you know, by herself thing, but now you've all obviously kind of got drum. I don't think the guitar's there. Then, you know, it kind of goes back to them again, and then it's you know, kind of drum, acoustic in that part. Then it gets to a point where it's basically just the bass player singing, and it's lyrically got to quiver, got to lick it. Obviously that's not the lyrics, it's just that's what I hear, got to quiver, got to lick it. And that's the way I think of it, just because it's hilarious if he's saying got to quiver, got to lick it, it's quite pervy and kinky. So yeah, obviously it's not lyrically that, but you know, it'll be funnier than what the video actually is, so I'll stick with that. Unless it'll ruin it for me if you know what he's saying. So this part, it's him just by himself singing that, so as well as acoustic. He does do this got to quiver, got to lick it on, again, not the lyrics, but he repeats this a fair number of times. Now I like the voice and then kind of style he uses for this section as well as the acoustic behind him, and then it kind of breaks up the kind of slight upbeatness of the previous stuff, and then it just brings it a bit more kind of down to earth again, and just something quite basic and rhythmic and, you know, quite pleasant until it kind of comes back to the end again. But I really like it, but some people might think it's a bit too repetitive. Then obviously it ends in everything kind of being together. Then it goes to Annette just with the piano, just closing it, kind of how it began, going back to simple. So let's get on to the next track. Last ride of the day is 4 minutes 31 seconds, and it's a pretty simple song. It's not, you know, overly complex. It's just a very kind of fun, energetic song, kind of like the first kind of track, Story Time. Just not as it's more well done on this track basically, but it kind of has the kind of same flow and everything of Story Time. So starting off, it's basically just you know, orchestra stuff, and then you get the choir coming in, you know, the typical choir, just a ha 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 ha. And then, you know, it kind of kicks off from there. The whole band comes in with the dun 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 dun, and then obviously the choir is doing the ha 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 ha, you know, over the top. So, you know, that typical thing, but obviously it's got a lot of high energy. It's a really interesting, cool sound. So, you know, it's good, even though they do kind of use that ha 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 a lot. But it's good nonetheless. Going into the verse, it's Annette very kind of soft and everything. But the band actually do support her instead of, you know, just disappearing and having her be by her lonesome. You have a few kind of strings, a bit of key and everything, then a bit of drum starts trickling in. Then it leads into the full band, you know, the dun 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 dun. Don't think the choir's there, I think it's just Annette there, and it's, you know, extremely high register vocal delivery that Tarja as well as Floor can't really accomplish. This is definitely Annette's kind of area of expertise with these real high energy stuff. Even the pre-chorus with the kind of fast flow of it, and you know, maintaining that highness of her voice as well as being, you know, singing it fairly fast and you know, maintaining the whole thing. When Floor tries to accomplish this, her voice is kind of like all over the place and becomes a mess because she can't hold it as well as Annette does. So you know, yeah, Floor live, she's like in a completely different area and things, and it wavers. So even the chorus, it goes real high end with the kind of keys and everything, and then Annette's again high register, which you know, is one of her specialties that is very difficult to do, and all these other people who say Annette can't sing, Floor is way better, Tarja's way better, they won't be able to hold the candle to this you know, area of singing. Annette definitely has this part. There is actually third solo here, so the album has 3 solos, so maybe there'll be 4 because we still have the last track. But this solo is a bit simplistic. It's just kind of speed that is repetitive. It's like interesting but a bit bland, and then at the start and at the end of the solo he seems to kind of do a lot of whittling on the whammy or something. So Yeah, so a very high energy song. When it's low and everything, then it builds up into that kind of like explosion of very high energy stuff. And it is supported. It's different singing style, so it brings you down and then brings you back up again. So it is quite simple, but it is kind of fun. It has a solo. It's not a grand solo, but it's good enough. And vocally speaking, as well as musically, with even though it's done in loads of other Nightwish songs, it's nicely done vocally. This is where Annette specials, really utilizes her talent. If you just listen to floor retards, you're not really going to get a pitch like this, because only Annette can really master it, unlike them two. So let's go on to basically the last track. It's the most epic track, being the longest. So let's get into it. Song of Myself. So this song is 13 minutes 30 seconds, so a very long song. It actually kind of starts off quite similarly to the previous track, Last Ride of the Day. So kind of like strings and everything, just kind of going for a while, and then eventually you get kind of choir, and then the dun dun dun, with the band. Quite typical Nightwish. The choir here isn't just ha 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 kind of things. They kind of hold on to it a bit longer, so it's ha ha ha. So ha ha ha. So they just kind of hold it a bit instead of just ha 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 kind of thing. So it's a little different, not drastically different. The band aren't doing the dun 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 style of thing either. It's still similar like that, but they kind of step back a tiny bit from doing that. So that's pretty much how it kind of starts. Again, quite Nightwish style, kind of like the previous song, but they just kind of changed it ever slightly. When it gets into the verse, it is actually quite the same, because it goes quiet, which again is kind of like all the previous Nightwish songs. It starts with dun 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 dun, and it's all fancy, then it goes ha ha ha, then it goes down to quiet, then it kind of peaks up back again. Consistent flow of how they approach songs constantly, so a little disappointing, but nevertheless, musically you do kind of get something kind of different, so same thing here. So on it, we're singing in the kind of whispery, kind of quiet area, light voice delivery, and then it's got a bit of orchestra kind of actually mixed in with her this time, so parts, not orchestra, the choir is there. It's just kind of keys with her as well, then the whole band come in, and instead of her going to as high a register as the previous song, she's not high. It's still high because that is usually where her voice kind of sits, but it's more of a natural kind of high voice, and she holds it very well actually. This entire verse is just like, she has such a high voice and so much power and so much control over it that it just sounds so nice and angelic, and that is really what you kind of get from this verse. Her voice really is amazing. It's not that real high pitch that she was going for in the previous track. It's just just a high standard pitch voice, but massively held and maintained, and good flow to it, and she has high elements to it where she just takes it to more of an enjoyable kind of area. Instead of just doing standard singing, just dun dun dun, we go dun 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 dun. So she definitely takes it in more kind of playful areas and everything. And then the break before the chorus comes in, you got the choir just ha 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 blah blah blah, type of thing, leading into the chorus where she just kind of lingers on the words a bit more and everything. So her vocal delivery is just rather nice, and then the rest of the song kind of plays out like that for the first chapter of the song, and then you get, because the song's put into different chapters for when it changes. So the second chapter is that kind of typical kind of just basic heavy riff, so dun 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 dun. There's nothing overly talented. It's just basically, look at me, I've done an effect on my amp, and people love that. So it's basically just that. It's just kind of heavy. Vocally though, there is two kind of vocal deliveries. There's the first one done by Annette, which is quite straightforward and everything, and she's trying to do it a little kind of creepy and everything, a bit, give us a bit of bass. I think she's trying to put into her voice. And it's just, you know, it's slow. It's just dun, dun, dun. And then she's trying to, you know, do it along with that pattern of being kind of creepy. But it just kind of comes across quite slow and dull. It's only in the second kind of part where her voice actually opens and goes a bit more, you know, singing. She actually sings more. That's when it gets good. But then she goes back to the old part. It's just like this. It's just kind of bland. I know you're trying to put a bit of like emotion and character into it, but when you use this with more of a singing open voice style, it's just a lot more rhythmic, a lot more beauty, a lot more musical. So her singing style's better there. I would like it if it was just constantly that. Like, yeah, she broke it up so you got different elements, and I usually like that, but because it doesn't work, I would prefer it to just be the one good thing instead of have a good thing and then something different where it just fails a little. You know what I mean? So I would have just preferred the more musical style because it actually sounds really pleasant, that more kind of vocally nice sing voice that she does for this part. So she just jumps between them two, and it's just, you know, the heavy kind of riff. So it's quite simple, then it leads into the next chapter. So these next kind of 2 chapters really plummets. Like, it goes extremely stupid in songwriting capabilities and just thinking of how to approach a song. It's just, they really were stupid with how they decided to do this next part. So the next part is the better part. It's not overly bad. It's basically just keeping that kind of heavy part going that was in the previous chapter, just the only vocals being just the choir, so it's just da 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 da, and they just kind of keep going like that for a fair while. Then it goes soft. So the majority of the band kind of just leave, and then you're just kind of left with kind of keys, maybe strings, kind of. And then we get a dialogue. So that's about in the middle of the track, so we've had about maybe 6 minutes. And it's dialogue, so it's just speaking. So it's this guy just basically speaking dialogue, obviously the story to what the album is, Imaginaerum. And yeah, if this was a play that you could see, and you've seen how the story progresses and you've got visual along with it, it would work. But because I'm kind of just sat here listening to music, and I may be listening to it in a car or at home or while I work or something like that, and all I'm basically getting is just someone talking to me, it's a bit dull because you're not really getting music anymore. You're basically just getting the dialogue finishing the story. So how long is this part? Well, it goes all the way to the end of the track. And this is why it's stupid. It's so thick. It's like 6-7 minutes of dialogue. It's just talking. No music happens. It's constant just keys. It's I just listen to this guy waffle on. A woman then comes in, but it's a woman's dialogue. So, well, you got something different musically. You've gone from a man talking to a woman. It's talking. It's nothing musical. Like, yes, I've got a different bloody voice, but in context, I don't fucking care. So, yeah, and then there's another kind of guy which has a more creepy voice. So exciting, I guess, because ooh, yay. It's just dialogue. It's like 13 minutes 30. Nightwish do these big epic tracks. Like on the previous album, they had The Poet and the fucking Pendulum. That was epic. This, for the first part, was like, this is epic. I can't wait to see all the multiple chapters. And then it's just like, let's have a massive section full of absolute dialogue. Crying out loud. Who the hell put up with that unless someone is seriously dedicated to the story? And yes, some people will be, and fine. If you're dedicated to the story and you're listening to it, it would probably actually be nice to sum up the end in dialogue with the characters and everything that you've come to know. But for the majority of people, the majority will just be here for listening to music and going on a musical journey. And I'm sorry, but this last part is not musical, nor a musical journey. It just kind of puts on the brakes and halts. And this is the end of the album. It ends on dialogue. That's it, it's over. To wrap up this, you know, masterpiece they're going for, and this massive conceptual album. You get 7 minutes of dialogue, that's how it ends. It just seems very disappointing to end like that. I wouldn't mind a little dialogue, but something musical to go underneath it and to not linger on it for like 7 minutes. It just seems so stupid. It's such a shame, really, because the first part is like, this is really interesting. I like it. Going well. I wonder what will come next. Because they have to keep changing for 30 minutes, but no, you just get massive long fucking dialogue. Idiotic, beyond belief. So let's kind of just get into the last track, which is the title of the album, Imaginaerum, and then I'll wrap things up for you all, and then we can get on with our lives. So let's get into it. So this last track, because I have stated before that Song of Myself is technically the last track, but then there's this track which is like 6 minutes. So you're probably thinking, well, what are you on about? What am I getting at? Well, Imaginaerum is a 6 minute long instrumental. No, it's not really an instrumental solo, there's no, you know, great leads or anything. All this track basically is snippets of the album, but instrumental. So you got a bit of story time in there, you'll probably have a bit of Turn Loose the Mermaids, Rest Calm, Crow the Owl, Left Right of the Day. So you just take elements of each song and just play the instrumental part, and then they just kind of stitch it all together to make Imaginaerum. So for people who like the instrumentation of the album, it's not a bad track actually. This I don't actually mind. Nightwish do kind of have nice music with you know, orchestras and choirs, and you know, the flute, which I think they didn't utilise a lot in this album, to be fair. They seriously should have used it more because it sounds amazing. They only used it in like the odd 2-3 tracks or something. So shame with that, but yeah, basically musically they're quite nice. Bit simple at times, yeah, but overall it's pretty well done. So just to kind of get you know, just a whole song of just basically covering the album instrumentally, I think it is quite nice, and you know, a fairly good way to wrap it up with the album. Some people probably won't be that interested, I know that. I know a lot of people will probably just delete it. But for the person who likes, you know, music, you know, just music, and don't complain of, oh, when's the singing gonna start? You know, like people who listen to pop and there's like, God, when are they gonna start singing? You know, brain dead people. Yeah, they're not gonna like it. But for people who do appreciate actual music and don't require a singer, and like the music in Nightwish, you'll be very pleased with this last track, I believe. Like, I'm not too fussed on it because musically they're not doing anything too advanced at times, but again, they do have interesting elements, so there are parts with Imaginaerum, depending on what mood I'm in, I appreciate it. So yeah, that is basically it for the album, so let's wrap it up. So, what have I overall thought? It's a big album that they've tried undertaking here. Obviously they're trying to do a story, a very intense story, because it's basically the concept of the album is about a guy who writes music. He writes music, he puts on an act and everything, and he's kind of dedicated his entire life to it. He has a daughter, and he kind of neglected her because he is so focused on his music. So on his deathbed, which is where it actually starts, he goes into his mind and goes through a journey in his mind of all these musical characters he's created, and through his music, and there's this entity that kind of chases him and everything, that it's an entity of his dedication to the music, and then the character is trying to find his daughter, and this entity is trying to keep him away by saying, this is not you, you don't care, all you care about is music. And then at the end, he kind of figures out he does care about the daughter, he only neglected her because he had a very troubled experience with his dad, and then when he kind of saw elements of his dad coming through in him, he decided it's probably best to avoid the daughter altogether. Not that he really did, he did spend a lot of time with her, but not as much as he probably should have, because he did fear this father figure that he had. The entity that was chasing him as well actually turned out to be his father as well. So that is kind of the story, and then in his final moments, obviously he figures all this out. He says, "I have to let go of you, Dad," and then, you know, pushes him away. And then he wakes up in his final moments just to basically just say how much he appreciates and loves his daughter. Don't know if the album is like that. There is a movie that came with this album which lasts over an hour. There is only like 3 songs that they put in the fucking thing, so you would think, well, there's a movie, this album's a story, it's going to be a musical. No, there's only 3 tracks, and they actually make them little snippets. So piss poor effort there, but there is a lot of dialogue and it explains the story. So if that is the case, then that might be the story then. But I do wish they had the lyrics actually tell the story, because it's supposed to. You don't need dialogue. Like Phantom of the Opera, they used lyrics and music to tell the story. This band seemed to have done that and then bloody forgot that they did that. It just seems really thick. But yeah, that is basically the story, I guess, unless it is kind of slightly different from movie to album. So it's a big concept and a big undertaking. So everything has to flow and everything has to work. And then obviously doing something that is kind of like a musical, there is a stage production that goes with musical. They don't have that. Everything has to be done in music. And I think a few things kind of falter in certain areas. So you've got like story time, and it's not really supported. Slow Love Slow is just extremely slow. Interesting idea and something very unique, but a bit boring. So there's just certain elements which is just quite dull, and then certain areas where they kind of get quite repetitive, and then other areas where it really, really works. So it's a bit all over the place. So yeah, if I were to give a score on this, it would be 7.5. It's a good album. It's a fairly good album, but they have a lot of falter. So that is it from me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.